Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video we are going to be doing a palette comparison or dupe video. I recently got my hands on the Natasha Denona Safari palette, and I have two palettes here now, one that just came in today, that are supposed to be dupes or at least mimic the Safari palette. So I really wanted to see, are these palettes as good or close to as good as the original Safari palette? The price difference, as you probably might guess, is significant, but as we all have different things that we value, some of us don't mind spending a little bit more if the quality is going to be great, but most of us are looking to save a little bit of money if we can. So today we're going to dive into all three of these palettes. I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on them. I want to start off by saying this quick little disclaimer for you guys though. I have a good feel on the Safari palette. I've had this for a couple of weeks and I have happily been reaching into this almost every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. Who does their makeup twice a day? I do sometimes play with eyeshadow before I exercise in the morning, which I think I've mentioned before. I know it's weird, but there it is. I've also had the Impressionism palette for 6 months now. I have a good feel on this palette. The Savannah palette, however, is brand new to me. This one from CColor Cosmetics I just got in the mail today. Now, initially when I had planned to do this video, I thought I would give these things a thorough test drive, try the different shades out side by side, multiple days in a row, see how long they lasted. But I did just notice that the Safari palette is still on sale at half price, and I do not know how long that sale is going to go on. So my fear was that by the time I got through testing all of these palettes out side by side, if that palette's not on sale anymore, I'm gonna tell you guys right now, if you were paying $129 for this palette, I would not recommend that, because I just think, for me personally, that is such an exorbitant amount of money to spend on an eyeshadow palette. So rather than wait, I really wanted to get this information out to you guys while this palette is still on sale, just in case this information helps you to decide whether or not you think you should pick this up while it is on sale. So here's how this video is going to go. I'm going to start off with each of these dupe palettes separately and compare them to the Natasha Denona Safari palette. We'll get into price, packaging, the amount of product that you're getting, and then at the end of the video, I'm going to do a look using these two palettes right here, because I will already tell you guys, just based on just the colors and layout at first glance, the Savannah palette from CColor is obviously meant to exactly dupe, or attempt to exactly dupe, the Safari palette, whereas the Impressionism palette, as you guys will see as we get into it, I think is more of a mimic to the Safari palette. There are quite a few differences in this one, but I hope that this video will be interesting and of course helpful for you guys. Any of you that are new to my channel, special welcome to you. I hope that you'll consider subscribing if you have not yet done that. If you want to be notified when I upload a new video, be sure to hit that notification bell as well. And with that said, let's jump right into these palettes. So starting off with the Impressionism palette from Focallure Cosmetics. This palette was sent to me back in the fall, just before Black Friday. They had contacted me, asked me if I wanted to try out their eyeshadows, and they said I could pick out a couple of palettes that I was interested in. This is the very first one that I saw that I was like, yes, that looks like the Safari palette. I would love to try that one. And I have to say, I'm really happy with this palette. It is not the best quality matte palette out there as far as the intensity of the pigmentation, but it is very blendable. They seem to last pretty well on me as long as I use a primer, and they are very buildable. I've used every shade inside of here now except for this black shade right here, and I'm very happy with this palette. I think it's a really fun palette to play with. This palette is currently on their website for $16.49. I believe the retail price on this palette is around $34, but Focallure is constantly running sales. I've never checked their website, and I check often because I've had to link this quite a few times, and every time I go there it is on sale for around that $15-16 mark. There are 18 shades inside this palette, which is 3 more shades than the Natasha Denona palette. There's 1 gram inside each pan, which makes the entire eyeshadow palette 18 grams in total. So let's take a look at the Safari palette in comparison. As you can see, it is quite similar, but if you really start to look closely, number one, you'll see that this one has more shades, but not just the 3. There are a lot that are close but are quite different. In fact, when I really sat down and started to just look at these and even swatch these a little bit, I probably only found about 5 or 6 nearly exact dupes shade for shade. Other than that, I would say a lot of the shades are very similar, but not quite exact. So there are some shades in here that are similar. These 2 corner pink shades right here are quite similar to each other. I also think the cream shade in the corner is very similar. The deep brown inside here is somewhat similar to the lighter deep brown in this palette, but I do think the browns in here are quite a bit richer and more warm and intense and pigmented than these ones are. This kind of pink plum color right here I don't think is inside this palette. This shade right here is a little bit more red in tone. And also this row of greens right here, with the exception of maybe this sort of more khaki army green right here. These 3 more blue toned greens are different in this palette right here. These ones I think are a little bit more soft, a little bit more muted, and I would actually even say a little bit more blue, whereas these 2 are a little bit more oceany green in tone. I also think this bold orange right here, you can see this orange right here is similar, but the intensity is definitely not there. So let's do a couple of finger comparisons to the ones that I think are similar, starting with that corner khaki shade. Here is the one in the Focallure Cosmetics palette. Here is the one in the Natasha Denona palette right here. You can see as you kind of go back and forth, it doesn't maintain its intensity in the way that the Natasha Denona was. It shears out a little bit more. And that's something I have definitely noticed with the Focallure one. You're going to get much more soft and sheer looks unless you take the time to build them up. I do want to show you guys though how if I add a second layer to the Focallure shade, you can get the intensity, you just have to work for it a little bit more, and that's something that I think you're going to find across the board. Now those aren't exact, they're similar, but they're not exact. Now let's dip into the light pinks in the corner and see how those two compare. So here is the Focallure one, here is the Natasha Denona one. Focallure right here, Natasha Denona right here. Okay, that's interesting. The Natasha Denona one is actually a little bit lighter in tone on the lid. You still get the rich kind of butteriness. I don't know if you guys can see that. It has a little bit more richness. You can feel that. It's not quite as powdery. It doesn't feel as sheer as the other one. I just think the color is a little bit lighter. That's kind of the difference that you're seeing right there. This one is a little bit more cool, kind of purple toned, but it is a little bit more sheer. And you can kind of see that if I start to sheer it out, you lose a lot of that intensity. So again, like the other shades in the Impressionism palette, you need a really good primer or you're gonna wanna really take some time to build it up. And when I say take some time, I basically mean go in with one more layer. I typically don't need to dip into the Natasha Denona palette twice. I get the intensity that I want on that first swipe, but with the Focallure one, I usually have to dip in twice to pretty much any shade if I want a little bit more intensity. Now I want to try out the dark purple right here, and I want to compare it to this color Hot Chocolate in the Focallure palette. So this is the color Voodoo from Natasha Denona, and then this is the color Hot Chocolate, which is kind of the purpley color in the Focallure palette. So again, this is Natasha Denona Voodoo, and this is Hot Chocolate from Focallure. So that's very interesting. The one in the Focallure palette actually looks more purple, whereas the one in the Natasha Denona palette is more of a brown purple. Now I want to test out the deepest brown inside the Natasha Denona palette, and I'm going to compare that to this brown in the Focallure palette. I feel like the other deep brown they included in the Focallure palette is more of a charcoaly black brown. I think these two might be a little bit more similar. So here's the one in the Focallure palette. This one is definitely very powdery feeling, very sheer feeling. And then this is the Natasha Denona brown. Oh, wow. Big difference there. That's really where you feel them. I mean, you can feel it. I don't know how much you can see it, but on that first swipe, you can feel how creamy and rich and intense that is. But once again, I know with a good primer and with 2 layers of this, I can definitely build it up to look a little bit more intense like this one would be. Now I want to try out the lighter teal color and compare it to this color right here. I know these 2 colors are a little bit different. I think this one from the Focallure palette has a little bit more blue in it, whereas the one from the Natasha Denona palette almost has a little bit more green or gray inside it. Here is the Focallure shade. I can already tell it's going to be a little bit lighter. Quite a bit lighter actually. And there is the one from Natasha Denona. So those are quite different. Let's go ahead and swatch next to these 2 shades right here, the darker green inside the Focallure palette, just to see how the 2 compare. So here's the darker green in the Focallure palette. So this one's actually looking a little bit more similar to the Natasha Denona, but as you can see, it does have a little bit more blue in it. So here's the lighter Focallure blue, here's the Natasha Denona, this is the deeper blue from Focallure. And the last comparison I want to do is this center orange shade right here. It's kind of a orange creamsicle shade. We're going to compare that to this shade right here, which is the shade Pumpkin Pie. So here they are on the finger, Natasha Denona, Focallure. I know it looks like my fingers are dirty, they're just stained. I did wipe them off really well. So there's the Natasha Denona shade, and here is the Focallure shade. Those 2 are quite similar actually. So I would say these are the shades that I think are the most similar. There are other similar shades inside here, but again, you guys, I don't think that these 2 palettes, now that I've used them both pretty thoroughly, there are surely a lot of similarities in them. If you like this color story and you cannot afford this palette, on sale or not, this is a great affordable option. I do still love this palette. And if you like having a handful of extra shades inside here, this might be a good one for you. One note I want to make on longevity, because I have tried this palette out pretty thoroughly. This palette lasts lasts fine on me as long as I use a primer. However, if I did not use a primer, I know for certain that it would not last as long as the Natasha Denona does. The quality in this is superior to this one, but I can get this one to work. And for the price difference, I think for a lot of us it would be worth the difference. Now let's move on to the Savannah palette and see how this one compares. So here is the Savannah palette. I have not used this palette out yet. This is my very first time testing it. This is clearly meant to be an exact dupe for this palette, and at first glance I can definitely see a lot more similarities, but I do, even at first glance without having swatched anything yet, see a couple of differences, and I want to kind of point them out to you guys. I can tell that there are a few shades in here that look to be a little bit more vibrant than this one right here. Particularly this shade right here has a little bit more punch to it. I also think this deep blue has a little bit more punch to it. This orange has quite a bit more vibrancy to it. And this brown right here is much more of a rich, warm brown. Whereas this one, even though it's a warm brown, it doesn't have the richness. Now that is just at first glance. I don't know if they're going to perform that way. It could be a totally different story. We will kind of see by going through and swatching a few of these. So for the eye look that we're going to get into at the end of the video, I'm really going to be using pretty much this whole outer row right here. We're going to do kind of a soft pink look. So I really want to swatch the other shades inside here since we're not going to be using them today. So let's swatch the browns and the blues and greens side by side, starting with that corner khaki green shade. Let's start right here. Here is the Natasha Denona khaki green, and here is the CColor Cosmetics khaki green. I can see some differences. I can tell the intensity of this shade it's much more intense. It actually looks kind of patchy on my hand. I have found though that even though they swatch a little bit patchy, I have no issues with these being patchy on my eyes when I apply them with a brush. They apply and blend beautifully for me, and I've tried most of the shades. In fact, I think I've tried all of the shades now in here. I tried the last couple, which were these deep purples this morning. Now let's go into that shade next to it, which is kind of the light gray. So here's the one in the Natasha Denona palette. This is the one in the CColor palette. Interesting. So once again, I feel like the CColor palette shadow is swatching better, which makes me a little bit nervous because I feel like this is going to be spreading false information, because I have used this shade and I think it is gorgeous on the eyes. It does not apply patchy on my eyes at all. I don't want you leaving these swatches feeling like these are poor quality, because they are really good quality on the eyes. And as many of us know, swatches don't always tell you how they're going to perform. So I'm really just comparing colors here. Onto the middle green right here, starting with the Natasha Denona shade right here. And then this one is the CColor. These ones are pretty similar. Now let's move on to the deep teal. This one I'm very curious about because this is one of the, oh my gosh. If you guys could see the richness of this on my finger, it is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It's so pretty. And then here is the CColor one. I can just feel a difference. The CColor one feels very dry, very chalky, very powdery. Not to say that it will be, but I mean, you can feel the quality of this shadow from Natasha. That's a such a beautiful color. Oh my gosh. Might be my favorite color in the palette. This one is definitely more dry. Can you see how much fallout I'm getting below my hand? It is beautiful. I don't think it's quite as rich as the other one, but surprisingly this one actually has more blue in it. And initially I thought this one would have a little bit more of that rich blue, but I do think this one has more richness. This one has more blue, but this one has more richness. Did that make sense? Okay, we're gonna move on to this row right here and swatch these browns and oranges right here, starting with the deepest orange. So here's the orange from Natasha Denona. I know it looks like my fingers are dirty. They are clean. They are just very stained right now. And then this is the one from CColor right here. I can see a difference in these two on my finger. Let's see how they swatch. Natasha Denona, CColor Cosmetics. Those ones are quite similar. This one is much more powdery, a lot more fallout when I'm swatching these. Curious to see how they perform on the eye. It looks like a 2-year-old swatched these shadows up here. Moving on to the deep brown next to that orange. Here's the Natasha Denona. Here is the CColor Natasha Denona. CColor. I feel like this one looks a little bit more warm. And again, these swatches look very patchy, but I can attest that their performance is great. Maybe not $65 to $129 great. That is certainly arguable, but they are good. I really like them. Moving on to that orange creamsicle shade in the center. Here we have Natasha Denona. Here we have CColor. Let's have a look at these two. Natasha, CColor. Pretty similar as well. Moving on to the warm brown, please ignore this swatch right here. I swatched the wrong brown and it was from the Natasha palette and I tried wiping it off and it is not budging. So these are the shades right here. We have Natasha right here and CColor right here. So starting with Natasha Denona. And then here is the CColor brown. Pretty similar, those two actually. Alright guys, so here are the swatches. These look much more similar, I would say, than the Focallure one. There are some differences, but I feel like for the most part, on the eyes, you're probably going to get very similar looks. Whether or not those looks will be as good quality, will last as long, we'll have to wait and see, but I do want to try something. If you watch Jen Love's reviews, when she does her eyeshadow palette review, she will do a dry wipe test where she'll wipe the shadows off and see which ones linger the most, because generally speaking, and I would agree with this, the ones that linger on your arm and don't dust away are the ones that will likely last longer on your eyes. So we're going to give that a try. Keep in mind the top shade was the Natasha Denona one. So I'm going to do a dry wiping. We're just going to try and wipe these off. We're just going to see which ones last and which ones don't. Okay, very interesting. So these two shades right here are both Natasha Denona. The brown underneath was the one from CColor. Looks like both of the oranges wiped away. As for these kind of blue-greens, it does look like the green from Natasha Denona lingered quite a bit more. This one's pretty much gone. And actually the grays, I don't know if you guys can see that top gray right there, but it's lingering a lot more than the one underneath. Actually, no, that was kind of that green right there. And the one right above that, which almost looks like a white right here, I am definitely seeing more of the Natasha Denona, and the same is true for this top one. So it does appear that the Natasha Denona shades fared much better with the dry wipe test. It looks like they're hanging around a little bit better, with the exception of these two right here, which were that orange creamsicle shade from the center. Both of those wiped off pretty much all the way. I can't say if that necessarily is going to translate on the eyes. That's going to take a lot more testing and trial and error. I can't comment on that today, but it is something I wanted to note and pay attention to, because generally speaking, I have found that to be true. When a shadow swatches really well and stains my hand, it usually means it's also going to last longer on my eyes. So now let's talk about these two palettes right here, and I'll also mention for you guys the details on the Natasha palette as far as price, amount of product that you're getting, along with this Savannah palette, and then you can compare that to the Focallure one. So the Savannah palette, I actually bought on Amazon for $12, but if you buy it from CColor Cosmetics website, it is $8. The Natasha Denona palette retails for $129 full price. I bought mine for half price, which put it around $64. Obviously, there is a big size difference in not just the packaging, but also in the individual shades themselves. You will see that they are much bigger inside the Natasha Denona palette. As far as grams, you get 1 gram per product in this one, which is identical to the Focallure palette. The Natasha Denona pans are huge though. They include 2.5 grams. That is 2.5 times the amount of product you're getting inside here. So that is a consideration. If you're buying this for $12, but you're getting almost 3 times the product in this one for $65, and the quality's better, it might help you to justify this one a little bit more. But I will also say this, for the majority of us, for the average consumer that is not a practicing makeup artist and not doing makeup from the same palettes on people multiple times a day at times, you probably don't need 2.5 grams in an individual pan. That is a lot of product. I can say almost for certain that even though I know I'll get a lot of use out of this palette because I love it, I will likely never go through these shadow pans, and probably 1 gram of product would be more than enough for someone like me that isn't a practicing makeup artist and has quite a few palettes to pick from. As far as the packaging, the Savannah palette is a cardboard package. It is a nice cardboard package. It reminds me a lot of ColourPop's packaging. You get a nice little mirror in here, and it actually might appeal to some people. The fact that this is smaller, it's more lightweight, it's a little bit more travel friendly because of its size. The Natasha Denona packaging is, however, very, very nice. I do enjoy the packaging. It is very sturdy, it's a little bit heavy, but it feels very luxury to me, and I do appreciate that. As much as I appreciate saving money more, I also appreciate really good packaging, and if that's kind of your thing and you have a budget where you can afford to splurge on this one, it's a nice palette. I will not deny that. Now for the last portion of this video, we are going to get into an eye look using the Savannah palette on this side, the Natasha Denona palette on this side. As I mentioned before, we're really going to be concentrating on this section right here. So this is going to be a very pink and purple soft look. I'm going to try and use as many of these shades as I can, and we will see if the final look comes out looking the same. So I'm going to try and use just one brush to do this. I have 2 brushes right here. These brushes for me perform identically. This one right here is the Wayne Goss number 18 brush. This one right here is the Rephr number 1 brush. So I'm going to use a different brush on each side just so there's no contamination. We want to be scientific here. I know there's no perfect way of doing this unless I own the exact same brush set in 2 different versions, and I just don't. But hopefully this will suffice for you guys. So let's kick things off by going into the Natasha Denona palette. And I want to start off by going in with this kind of flesh tone color right here. So this shade is going to go all over my lid, up through my crease. Then with my Wayne Goss number 18 brush, we're going to dip into the Savannah palette, into that same shade right here. And again, just dusting that all over. Now dipping into the transition shade in the Natasha palette, I'm going to apply that very lightly through my crease, slightly above as well. And now dipping into the CColor palette with my Wayne Goss brush. Okay, these shades really performed pretty much the same. I'm going to take that same shade with that same brush, and we're just going to run a little bit under this lower lash line right here, all the way across, almost to the inner corner, not quite. And same color, other brush, other side, Natasha Denona. So there we are, that was just one dip each side. I'm not double dipping, we're gonna do the same amount of dips. Now I'm gonna go into the light pink in the corner, Natasha Denona side, Refer number 1 brush, and this I'm gonna pull right through my actual socket or crease. Wayne Goss brush and the CColor palette. Now I want to take this shade right here and we're going to pop that on the lower lash line just halfway across. Again, this is the Refer number 1 brush. And same thing, one dip, Wayne Goss brush, CColor palette. Now let's move into this lighter purple here. Refer number 1 brush again, and we're going to build this right through this outer corner right here and outer part of the lid. I'm really kind of building this in like a C shape. Now one dip into the CColor palette with my Wayne Goss brush. And again, just kind of building this in a C shape here. Interesting. Okay, so this one feels a little bit more of a soft purpley pink, whereas this one has a little bit more depth to it. I don't know if you guys can see the depth difference. It's pretty subtle. Now let's dip into the deep dark purple right here. This is the color Voodoo in the Natasha palette. Couple of dips right onto the very tip of my Refer brush, and we are going to just start building this right onto the upper lash line. And pulling it right up through just this outermost corner right here. And now my Wayne Goss brush into the CColor palette, same shade. I still kind of feel like I have a little bit more richness on this side. You guys see this corner, whereas this one, I mean, it's dark and it's rich, but I don't feel like it's quite as intense with one dip. I know that if I dip back in, I could get this side to look a little bit more rich like this one. So I'm going to wipe just what's left on each of those brushes off so they're relatively clean. Then we're going to dip into this light pink shade right here, and that we're going to apply all over the lid. Starting on the Natasha side. And I'm just putting this about halfway across. And I'm going to wipe off my brush. I'm going to take the tip of it and just blend this corner right here, just to kind of pull back some of those shades that were underneath and blend out any edges. And now this side, let's go in with my Wayne Goss brush to this corner shade right here. So I do want a little bit more pink right here, so we're going to dip back into a mixture between these two shades right here. I'm just going to take one tap in the light pink, one in the darker pink. Tap them off on my finger. This is the Refer brush, and I'm going to put this right kind of between the center and the outer half of the lid. I'm just trying to add a little bit more color right here. And now same thing on the other side, taking one dip into the lighter pink, one dip into the darker pink. That was 2 dips, wasn't it? And just starting to build this on this outer corner. Alright, so there is the finished eyeshadow. we're gonna leave it there. Normally, I can't resist putting a little bit of shimmer on my inner corner or on my lid, but for today's video, we're just gonna leave it where it is. I am going to add a little bit of liner just to my waterline on both sides. I'll use my Wet n Wild liner, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of mascara, and I will be right back with my final thoughts. So here are the finished eyes with the two different palettes. They look pretty dang similar, I have to say. Considering the price difference, if you are on a budget, I would say no doubt go for the Savannah palette. I will, however, say this. I don't regret picking up the Safari palette. I do think her quality and her matte formula is really exceptional. I don't think it warrants the massive price difference, but it is really, really good quality. And obviously, I have not used this one thoroughly yet. I can't comment right now on what the longevity is, what the overall quality is of the entire palette. So far, what I've used and what I've swatched, I've been really impressed with. I will be sure to come back and include that information as I've gotten a better feel on this palette and how it compares to the other two. I am planning to do an update video in the next couple of weeks on products that I've been trying out and reviewing over the last couple of months. I will be sure to include this palette and my thoughts on its quality and longevity in that video. But I hope that for today this video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully seeing the palettes side by side, seeing them swatched, and of course seeing how they perform on the eyes side by side. Hopefully that's helpful for you guys in determining whether or not you need this palette in your life, because even at its 50% off price, it is still a lot of money. But thank you guys so much for watching today's video. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if you guys have any thoughts on either of these palettes if you've tried them out. Thank you again for stopping by. One more reminder, if you haven't subscribed, I hope that you'll do that before you leave, and I will see all of you in my next one. Bye. You might be able to see this. Okay, this is really hard to do. I need a third hand. Third hand. Kids, wanna come help me? I also think this bold orange right here, while you can see, this is really awkward. I'm trying to swatch and not do this so I don't have the double chin, but I might just have to double chin it from here on out because these look terrible. So I actually like that I have two of these palettes now. I know, three technically, sort of. Ridiculous. It's for science. I did it for science. I bought three so that you might only buy one. You like my necklace? What's that? Who taught you that?